Um, as food service directors and department leaders, we all have obviously been faced with enormous unforeseen challenges over the last 7 months. And by all accounts, you and your colleagues nationwide have met every challenge with creative adjustments and ideas, often changing processes on a dime. As always, you've been asked to do much more with quite less. This is all a very familiar part of our job. But moving forward, how can you ensure that you're able to create a program that not only meets all of the new budgetary goals set forth by your administration, but also provides a level of service that equals your patient and customer expectations? Things will have to change, and we want to help you make solid, numbers-based decisions as you retool your program. Steve McKenna brings a broad array of service skills to our team with hospitality and management experience across an incredibly wide spectrum. Most recently, he served for 12 years in corporate services for a major healthcare organization where his portfolio included not only food and nutrition services, but also environmental services and a number of other hospital disciplines. Steve has been with DM&A for over 10 years. Hi, Steve.
Hey, John. Good afternoon.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you, and thanks for providing this information for us today. I'll start by asking you, why now? Why is this a good time for directors to take a deep dive into their department's operation?
Well, John, first of all, thanks for the invitation to participate. And I want to thank Na, who's our IT expert. She's in the background holding her breath, waiting for me to press the wrong button, but I do not plan to do that today. So I appreciate that. We've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, John, on our side at DM&A. When we look back on the second quarter of this year and into the third quarter of this year, the way I sort of liken our perception was, and I speak on behalf of ourselves, but also our clients and potential clients, it sort of felt like this COVID-19 era would be kind of like a book, a novel, with a beginning and a middle and an end. And it seems with each passing day that it's really not going to be that. It's really not going to be, there's not going to be a foreseeable end. When we look back on March, I was out in the field with a client when everyone was starting to tape up their salad bars and shut down their Pepsi and Coke machines and that kind of thing. And the perception was that this was starting to be an awful thing, but somehow it would end. So the first section of our book, so to speak, was one of reaction, crisis management. And it looks like we're going to be entering a period now of accommodation for all of our clients. So we're starting to see the need for people to take a fresh look at things. We're in a business, and what we've seen our acute care customers realize on the clinical side is that during that period of crisis management, nothing much happened except COVID-19 and the reactions to it. So we're not here to speak as clinicians, but there was a lot of medical care that wasn't happening, surgeries that weren't happening. And now we're at the point where I think, John, the beginning is over. We're at the end of the beginning, if you will. And that's sort of when we came up with the idea of helping folks look at this next phase as a business. And that's where we are today. That's what brings us together today. We're in a business, our institutions, our businesses, and bit by bit, in a diplomatic way, in a sensitive way, things are opening up. I know I was thinking as I walked through our local supermarket the other day here, I remember they shut down the salad bar, and all of a sudden it's back. There were no donuts for 5 months. All of a sudden there are donuts. That's a very meaningful thing for me anyway. So there wasn't a press release. There wasn't anything big. It was sort of, to me, that was kind of a visual accommodation that we're slowly but surely getting back in business. So that's what brings us here, John.
I see. So what you're saying is then patient services in general is that coming to a crossroads?
I think so. I think we want to be very careful to acknowledge what our colleagues in the industry have done this year. It's really heroic. Now, that's a word that's been used profusely over this year. But I think, to me, if I were to look at the lemonade from lemons, our colleagues in the healthcare dining industry have done a wonderful job. I think in a strange way, we're on the map in a way we've never been. We saw people breaking down their salad bars and doing pop-up groceries. If on one hand, nobody was concerned as much as we used to be in terms of courtesy of the server and those kinds of things, people were getting meals out in a crisis situation. They were changing plateware, changing serviceware, changing retail operations, on the fly implementing new and different sanitation procedures. So I think our guys did a great job. The ability to adapt on the fly. I think I think everyone's done a wonderful job, but we don't mean this in any negative sense, but we are in a "what have you done for me lately" business, and that's kind of why I put that comment on the slide. Everyone listening understands that. In January, before the COVID-19 era began, nobody listening today would have said, "Let me talk about my budgets of 2017. Let me talk about my pristine results from 2018. We're just in that business. What have you done for me lately?" And what we're hearing from our administration partners is, we got through the crisis, yay for us. Now let's plan.
So we're at this crossroads, and I want to ask you about the point one on this slide 4.
Yeah.
Be prepared with the position. I love what that says, but I want to make sure that I'm thinking what that says is exactly what you meant.
Okay. That's my favorite line, I think. And because we could have said that a year ago or 2 years ago or 5. When we look at our experience, John, with DM&A, where we see success is where our chefs, our directors, our leadership in the dining services have had data at their disposal. They're proactive. They don't just say, "Let me take last year's budget and do times 105, and they'll give me times 102, and that'll be good." This is really the most important time during my career, I think, for our colleagues to stake out a position. And it's a tough time because there really isn't a position when people call us and say, "What's the future?" The answer is really nobody knows. I mean, people are saying, let's dismantle the salad bar, let's bring it back, let's do it in a modified way. What if COVID-19 comes to an end? What about COVID-22? But the important thing for us when we look at labor, when we look at food costs, when we look at our policies for next year, stake out a position, be prepared to defend it. And that's what we want to help people to do. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I thought. And so what we're talking about is, what steps do you take to collect the information? How do you gather the information and then put together a business plan cohesively that you feel comfortable bringing to your administration? Okay.
Yeah.
So what are I think in slide 5 you have what exactly the financial implications of the changes that you're talking about. Like what would be some examples of those financial changes?
Well, I think, John, I'm going to back up just for a second. Can I talk about room service and patient volume for a minute?
Absolutely.
Room service, most everybody knows that's been middle of our wheelhouse for a number of years. Enhanced dining is sort of a part of that subset. One of the questions that we very commonly get right now is, should I proceed? Should I continue? Should I backtrack? Okay. We've got a number of potential customers out there who have said to us, I really want to do this. We're ready to go. I'm just not sure now's the time. So we want to be advocates for that. We do have people implementing and maintaining room service, and that has financial implications. Okay. If I were an administrator and I were looking at room service, I would look at my dollars spent. And if we wait a half a year or a year or 2 years, we're going to forsake the value of some of those dollars. Most room service or enhanced dining implementations can save folks 20–25% of their food costs. So that's a financial factor besides a service factor. When a lot of people are experiencing different things in terms of patient population, what happens if we're serving fewer patients? What have I done with labor? Have we reallocated labor? What do we think it's going to look like in 2021? I know one hospital in particular we're talking to went through about a 60 or 70% patient population reduction in the second quarter into the third quarter, and they're back at 95%. So those are the things we want to talk to our administrators about and say, let's not make a plan necessarily based upon next week, but what do we think it's going to look like in a couple of months?
Yeah. So how I guess working with your own facilities financial department and CFO, and getting that information would be some of the first steps that if you I feel certain everybody has a relationship of some sort with them. Yeah. But what else would you recommend? Where do you look? How far back do you go? How do you create that kind of benchmark of where you feel that you are now and could be?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing that I would do when I'm looking at things like cost, John, for example, everyone is experiencing spikes in food costs. There's no way around that. Are we baking that into our budgetary plans? Are we looking at menus, for example? I'm going to skip just to, I'm looking at some of these financial factors. We want to encourage our folks to take a hard look at the menus. I'm going to talk about patient menus for a minute, and then we'll move on to catering and retail. Are we really keeping careful track of the costs for our menus? This is the time to really look at some of the old premises that more is more. I think the same principle sort of applies when we get into the retail side. I remember going through room service menus, cook serve menus that have an awful lot of items on them. They didn't necessarily use cross-utilization of ingredients. This is the time to mitigate those cost increases by looking at how well we have fewer products coming in the door, how well we cross-utilize them. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Supply chain, it's always been sort of an issue for our colleagues, our directors, and our chefs. Now's the time to really look at maximization of our supply chain resources, making sure we're getting some of those rebates tallied and credited. And again, I go back to mitigating cost increases to enhanced dining. We really want people not to back off a transition if they want to get out of a cook serve, or if they want to get out of a cook chill model. There's a lot of money to be saved that's going to be very meaningful if people sort of stand their ground and try and proceed in the near future. So I think that's really, John, we have to contain costs to survive. One of the other premises of our presentation is the customer service metrics in our business are not going to go away. So going back to what we said a few minutes ago, nobody was calling us in April and saying, boy, I don't know what to do about my courtesy of the service score last month. we need some coaching. It was really more like, let's get food on a plate and get it to the guests safely. But what we're starting to see again is those metrics will take some prominence. This too shall pass in some way, and those Press-Ganey scores, the Gallup scores, those will assume the kind of significance they used to have in the past. So the trick for our guys is to really say, how do I rewrite the menu? How do I rewrite the staffing grid so as to get best practice outcomes and ensure customer service outcomes as well?
So yeah, we're working with a new set of parameters, but what you're saying is that the expectations aren't going to change. That Press-Ganey and patient satisfaction scores ruling the day will come back, and probably already are. But do you have any specific examples of how departments can change their current offerings or services to meet some of these new financial burdens and goals?
Johnny, are you thinking in terms of the retail side now?
Yeah, I mean, well, any from anywhere. I mean, certainly retail would be an opportunity to make some changes. I think that there's going to be a lot more expectations for delivery and so forth. I was just curious if you had some insights.
Well, I'll share a story, for example, that happened recently. I was visiting a current client, doing a routine checkup of a room service installation. And I think a lot of our attendees would say some of our trade delivery has shifted because of COVID-19. We've always coached everyone to deliver as many trays as they can within a building, even before this time, because we like the control, we like the customer service, we like the scripts. Good afternoon, my name is Steve. I'm here to help you. Would you like your door open or closed? We'll be back in an hour. I was visiting a client, and I was doing a walkthrough with the server at about 10 o'clock. There were some late breakfast trays, and I noticed a tray on a nurse's station desk, and it was a time ticket that had 7 o'clock on it. So that was one of those little aha moments for where we are right now. Lots of people are telling us nurses are delivering all the trays. That's a beautiful thing in one way, but not so much in another way. So I sort of gently asked around. I asked the employee, I asked a couple of people at the desk, what about Mr. So-and-so's tray? It's still here. It's 10 past 10, and that's a 7 o'clock tray. And those are always sort of the danger signs for us, John, when we look at meal delivery. So the moral of that story for me was let's look at whether we can work with infection control and the nursing team to get out of that emergency mode and maybe take back some of those tray deliveries. That will help our score. When that person did not receive his tray, and I asked the folks at the desk, well, maybe he's at a test, maybe he's discharged, maybe he's transferred. Those are not good answers. So that's a sort of a patient service thing. We're looking, another example that I observed recently, what is the trayware? So we spent so much time over the years saying, let's make our trays look like restaurant trays. And then all of a sudden, boom, everybody was back to styrofoam and that kind of thing. It's time to work with infection control, take a look at those things. I've actually been in a hospital where the COVID-19 patients were segregated, and it was one dish machine, one set of trays, one set of dishes, one set of coffee mugs, and everybody was being very dutiful about bagging up that patient's stuff in a big old garbage bag, taking it back to the kitchen, and washing it with everything else. So there's a lot of processes where we're sort of encouraging people to think, let's get out of that emergency mode. And we'll talk about the retail, I think, in a minute, Sean, in terms of what people can do differently.
Yeah, and I think that what you're describing are steps that folks can start taking, now to get there as they start building up an idea of what they want their end game to be for their department. Maybe, maybe it's not time to change from nursing, passing the trays and so forth. But as you have said, and I agree, it's going to come down to, finance. going to come down to money. So often retail and catering kind of rows the boat, for your department, and allows us the opportunity to feed the patients. No, I where I'm getting at. So where can you find some cost savings and make some changes? I know you have some good thoughts on catering.
Yeah, catering and retail, John, those have been a couple of topics that have been near and dear to my heart, and I think some of our colleagues on the DM&A team feel the same. We've gone into places and we say, how, before we talk about a transformation, let's talk about what percentage of your activity and your money is dedicated to catering and retail. And I always try and take care when I'm on location to say, please don't anyone run out and say, oh, the coach said we don't have to do that anymore, because that's really not where we're coming from. But I think what I've always observed, John, that's different about healthcare dining departments is that we don't treat ourselves and we don't ask to be treated in the same way that other clinical departments in the hospital are. If you think about it, the director of an emergency room would not go to the board and say, I'd like to knock down a wall and add 20 more bays because I kind of feel like we should, or because the wallpaper's ugly. Other departments have business plans, and they have to justify the next step in the service or eliminate or reduce the service. So for me, catering and retail, this is a perfect time to look at that. So what do we mean? We go into a place and we're looking at a transformation of patient service, and we say, how many cooks do you have? And somebody says, we have 8.8 cooks, but 4 of them work on catering. This is the time to sort of look at that and say, is that a good way to utilize our labor in a tough time? People will say, well, we bill it all out, so it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, because that's funny money. So when we think that way, it's time to change the way we think. When I look at the retail side, another story, John, I was doing a management training with a client a few years ago, and the CFO said, I want to walk through the cafeteria. I can't understand why we're not making any money here. I must not have the right people. And the first thing I see is coffee, 20 cents with free refills. I'm absolutely sure that kind of thing is still happening. It's probably not 20 cents now, but those kinds of things are still happening. So I think this is the time to say, should we run our retail operation like a business? Hospital retail has always had 3 or 4 different faces, as it were. It's been a convenience. It's been a comfort place. It's been kind of a business. It's been kind of an employee benefit. So this is the time to say, what do we want our retail to be? Do we want to have 117 different beverages, taking up space, taking up inventory dollars, that kind of thing? So I would just say this is the time for our customers to take a look at retail, make a really good business plan. Again, to go back to the analogy with other departments in a hospital, you wouldn't, if you were the director of imaging, you wouldn't say, I'm going to ask for 10 FTEs. I'm going to ask for an increase in budget, just cause. So let's put our retail operations on that same playing field, come up with a business plan. And that way, if people don't get capital, don't get labor allocated, they can at least show administrators, these are the economic consequences of those decisions. But if we want to run things more like a business and price things like a business, we can offer money to the organization.
So kind of now taking advantage of, like you had said earlier, making a little bit, lemonade out of some lemons in this very difficult and challenging situation. But now that some food service departments, administration is looking at them in a more positive light, perhaps giving
Yeah.
the food service director a little bit more muscle / respect, if you will. And now would be a good time to create this plan that can finally come to terms with what that administrator's view is of what the cafeteria should be. Is it a revenue stream, or is it a service for the employees? Because what is your opinion on, can it be both?
Yeah, I think that's the question. Can it be both? It can be both, and it may be a matter of how we slice the pie. I remember an executive in a hospital asking a couple of years ago, what do you think I ought to do with my cafeteria? And I said, well, let's start with, what do you want it to be when it grows up? Is it a comfort place? Is it a hangout? Is it a sort of a culinary version of a dental plan? Is it a business? And it may be that it's not all one, maybe 3 slices of this and 2 slices of that. But this really, to me, is the time when staffing is stressed. I'm looking at, what's on the menu. Sometimes on the patient side, John, we will walk in and see what I call a diner menu. And I know our chefs are sensitive to that. How many different versions, do we need meatloaf and Salisbury steak and so on? How much do we need? How much do we need on the retail side? Periodically, I'm tasked in my area to do a Happy Meals run for the grandchildren. Yogurt went away at McDonald's around here. They seem fine with it. The grandkids seem fine with it. I'm sure that's a decision that maybe someone was saying at this time, must we always think more is more? Could we be profitable and more efficient and use less labor if we offer fewer things?
Yeah, that does often go against the grain of traditional thought process for both chefs, leaders, administrators, directors. Yeah, I'm guilty myself. Always looking for more, and people want more choices.
Yeah. Well, maybe sometimes you do fewer things better.
Right. Okay. So what other areas besides menu and food and inventory can directors start seeking out some ways to save in their departments?
John, purchase agreements, GPOs, rebates, we made some reference to earlier. It's not necessarily a financial thing, but one of the things that we're really seeing everywhere, and this is not just our business, but in our society, sanitation and the perception of sanitation has a direct effect on business, and it's never been more acute. I've had the privilege of, in years past, attending Press Ganey Customer Satisfaction School and Studer School and some of those things. Years ago, I stole a slide and I carried it around in my head all this time. And the slide said, everything speaks. And we use that with our EVS customers as well. But people are really looking at the perception of enhanced sanitation. And it's almost, in some ways, you could almost say it's gone overboard. But at the same time, the little things that have a business effect matter now in a way that they never used to. I would bet at least prior to March of this year that I could walk into any hospital and find a little 8x11 plastic menu sign in a cafeteria that was cracked and had thumbprints all over it and that kind of stuff. So those days are gone. Everybody wants to see the hand sanitizer and all that stuff. So we're really not focused today on plexiglass screens, but we're really focused on the client perception. Uniforms. What do we look like? What does our environment look like? Would you like, John, to have $1 for every time we've looked behind a retail line and seen the cardboard boxes and the brooms and the mop bucket and those kinds of things? So they've never been good to see, but they resonate now in a way that they never did before, frankly. And people are making those decisions, it's it always used to be, I'm going to look at the carpet and judge it from the point of view of ambiance, but now I'm looking at it in terms of how often do you clean it.
Yeah, true. Do you think that I know that when we spoke with our colleague Della, who runs our IT and our informatics department, she had mentioned something that I found insightful, is that most people have some people might be underusing the technology that they have in their facility. So perhaps it would be time to look at what without any kind of expense, just some more education or some call to that vendor, and just see what your current operation can benefit, how it can benefit from something you already own.
Yeah, John, that's a great point, and I'm glad we have that in here. Della's been a fabulous resource for us as co-coaches and for our clients. And I think she would probably permit me to say, as the takeaway sentence, the percentage of people in our industry who maximize their dietary software is very low. And that's just how it is. And it doesn't, and we have our own software. There's other vendors out there, but the larger point is, we've always talked internally about how people buy things. They buy modules and they don't really use them. And it may be a function of not really knowing what it does, not really knowing what it is you bought. So I think that's another great opportunity. My son has changed jobs, but he used to work for Outback as a kitchen manager. And I'll bet if I called him tonight and I said, I want you to tell me all the recipes and the per serving costs for everything on an Outback menu, I bet he could do it. They just drill it into those guys. Not everybody is that diligent in healthcare. So this is the time to take that suggestion and say, let's look at our recipes. Let's look at our costing. Let's look at our inventory controls. When I started in the business, everyone did production sheets, theoretically. But you still can walk in right now and find people who say, well, it's the third Tuesday of the month, so I cook 125 chicken breasts because that's the way we always do things. We can't do that. We can't do that anymore. So this is the time for everybody to get upgraded in terms of their software capability, and or to look at what you already own and say, I'm not sure what to do with this, but it kind of feels like I'm paying a monthly note on a car, but I'm not driving. So I think that's great advice from Della to really get that in there. Let's look at our production tools and our costs. Chances are people have more than they know they have or they know how to use.
I would say she's exactly right. Well, all of these are great points, 100% valid areas to pursue, but it really does come down to your team, your staff.
Yeah.
I would have to go back to, I think that food service workers, the folks in the call center, the cooks, I know that they are walking with their heads a little higher after this COVID-19 situation because of all the help and they were able to provide and really be part of that healing team, which is something that we try to instill, that the nutritional services department is as important to the healing of every patient that comes in your hospital as any other department. We touch every patient, often every patient's family, and the emotional attachment that people have with food is a powerful thing. I think that really, really showed through the early stages of the pandemic, certainly, and continues, today as we still struggle in some areas. So what are some of your thoughts on employee morale? What are some action steps we could take that aren't just, lip service?
John, a little bit of history for our friends in terms of our company. Destination 10, which is and has been leadership development and staff engagement. That's always been sort of a core for us. That's been sort of our go-to thing, even as the prevalence of room service in our portfolio escalated. And the song says everything old is new again. This staff engagement question is vital right now. I think you're absolutely right. I'm really pleased with how people in our business feel about themselves, the leadership and the hourly associates. This is the time to make sure that our employee engagement culture is really robust. Sometimes in our classes, John, we use a phrase of embedded morale versus transactional. So what does that mean? I think it's great that people have a meal coupon, they have a free ice cream, they have a movie ticket. That's all great. And we never want to say, gee, let's not do that. That's kind of, to me, that's important, but it's not enough. It's transactional. It's sort of a cotton candy sugar high thing that I got the movie ticket or I got the good parking space for October. But this is really the time for everybody to be walking around, seeing what people are up to, reassuring them that their safety is paramount, reassuring them that we're up to date on what the standards are as they evolve on the fly, reassuring them that we value what they're doing. I don't think it's ever been more important. What's interesting for us is we actually talk to food service directors and chefs who say, I'm having trouble filling positions. And it's a little counterintuitive on the surface. When you say we have 7.9% unemployment, it could be more than that. I don't understand. Why isn't there a line outside the building? A lot of answers for that, but one of them is a percentage of our employees are afraid to come to work. Just as restaurants reopen, and they say, well, in my state, I can be at 25% or 50%. There's still going to be a percentage of those potential guests that just won't come. So right. You would think that qualified, eager folks would be tripping over themselves to get on our payroll. That's not necessarily the case. So that just means we've got to work harder to retain the good folks that we have.
I agree, and there are plenty of them out there. Well, Steve, we have some questions that people have sent in, and I'd like to ask those a few of those for them, if you don't mind. Primarily, we this stays with the topic of labor and FTEs.
Yeah.
Is there a standard formula to verify that I have the correct amount of FTEs? Like, I guess they're, based on size, census, licensed beds, service, meal service style. Is there a formula for that, to verify that in their business plan?
John, you're going to love the answer, but you're going to hate it, I think, at the same time. That's the 1 millionth time we've had that question over the years. I think the safest answer is no, comma, asterisk. By that, I mean, if you were to say, I'm going to go buy a new car tomorrow, how much money should I bring? I wouldn't have an answer. I'd need to know more about your needs, your desires, your disposable income. When we do what we call an assessment in a kitchen, somebody wants to transition to enhanced dining from cook chill or cook serve to full room service, we spend a day just on labor. There's some basic metrics. I think most people who have enhanced dining or room service would say, I try to keep maybe 30 guests to a hostess or an ambassador. We try and keep 65 or 70 potential guests to a call center associate. But there's so much about that needs to be drilled down in depth. When I look at tray servers or associates, it's not quite so simple as a nose count. Are you filling the pantries? Are you partly filling the pantries? Are you taking menu orders? Are you not taking menu orders? Are you delivering full room service to a particular nursing unit? or is it more of a drop-off where you take a 20 cart and leave it for the nurses and come back in an hour? When we look at a department, and sometimes administrators will say, don't give me the long version. 180 patients, how many FTEs? Well,
right.
This may make some of our colleagues weak, but there are places we found with 100 beds where there's 1 or 1.5 or 2 FTEs for clerical help. Maybe someone does payroll, someone does ordering. We've also been in 500-bed places where there's no clerical help, and the director is the guys or signing the payroll and placing the bread order. So do we have stock people? So I wish I could say that it was sort of in our experience, that it's sort of a one-size-fits-all, just plug in your data to this grid and hit enter. I think that's fundamental, but I don't think there's a shortcut. I just think it needs to be broken down location by location. And also the bottom line question is, John, what kind of service? What kind of service do people want? What do you want it to be, again, when it grows up? If you want full room service dining, we can build that a certain way. If you want a different version, we can build that a certain way. So I wish I had an easier answer, other than it's a painful process to really arrive at a good FTE count, but it tends to be site specific.
That kind of segues pretty interestingly right into this other question. I'm faced with potentially cutting services to meet my administration's, I guess it's thoughts. How do I get the most savings bang for my buck? Which services should I look to cut first?
Well, I think what I would probably do if I were in that place, wherever that place is today, I would say let's take a blank slate, and let's on the left side of our menu, so to speak, let's break down the tasks of every existing employee. Okay, so typically I don't know where that is or who that is, but typically someone might say, well, I have 17.5 productive diet aids. That's square one. Now let's break it apart. What do they do? When do they come in? When do they take their breaks? We'd have to almost pick up the job flows for each and every one. I think I would have to start there and then get a good understanding of what everybody's doing. Now, by the way, there's very often hidden FTEs in there. So you may have more FTEs than you think you have. And then on the right, I would say, what are the values that your boss defines as primary? Do you want to be best in the country, best in your database for customer service outcomes? Here's what we think that takes in terms of cooks, servers, starters, expediters, etc. And it's perfectly valid for the administrator to say, no, I can't afford that. So then you have to say, let's recalibrate. What I would honestly, if generically, let's say this in a diplomatic way. Sometimes when I'm in this situation with a customer, where do I start looking? I kind of start looking with stock. I kind of start looking with something called the ingredient room. I kind of start looking at some of the things we talked about. Is it productive for us to do the catering? I've really had people say, and I've observed, we're late with lunch because I had 23 catering tickets today. So I'd look at those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely the ingredient room. Storerooms, I've been fortunate enough to be in plenty of kitchens over the last couple of years, and when you see, you can tell right away, when you look at a stock room based on how many patients, meal tickets are going out. This is a question. I think we have time for one more.
Sure.
And I've had this question posed to me multiple times recently. Is it a good idea to revert back to tray line service from room service, which this person already has?
Yep. personally, my rote answer is no. But I think we would have to be fair rather than just say, no, that was a mistake. We'd have to say, what were your customer satisfaction outcomes a year ago? What do you want them to be in the spring of 2021? What menu changes have you made? How much labor have you saved and where did it go? So I can think of one client, for example, who was faced with just a fiat last year. I need X FTEs gone. That's it. Figure it out. I don't want to know about outcomes. Every department has to give back X amount of labor. So that particular client went to partial room service, meaning they kept the full menu, but rather than have dine on demand, so to speak, they reverted to a partial product and said, okay, we're going to go to 2 West at 12 and 2 East at 12:20 and 3 West at 1, that kind of stuff. So I would really ask those questions. How much did you save and where did it go? Where did the saved labor go? And what's your satisfaction outcomes? That's about the best I could do, John, without actually being there and picking apart the data with someone.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for putting this together. It's always fascinating to listen to you talking, and all of your experience, not only in your career, but then also the 10 years that you've helping folks across the country in improving their departments. It seems like
thanks,
you have
John. I appreciate your opportunity to invite me. I hope I at least vaguely kept up on the slides. I find it hard to think and talk and use my finger. So anyway,
I think we made all of the points. I think your information was great and the slides were good too.
But compared to what Na thought I would do, I think I did okay.
Yeah, I think so. Hey, we got some questions. I think people were engaged. No, it was great. I appreciate it, and there's a lot to think about. And again, thanks for. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I just thank you again for the opportunity, and I hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable weekend with their families.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve, and thank you all for the questions and for participating in our webinar today. Certainly a lot to think about. And if you'd like to learn about how we, DM&A, can help you review your operation, find some solutions for you to present to your administration, please feel free to reach out to me at john@destination10.com. That's JON@destination10.com. And you can definitely just check out our website, destination10.com, to learn more about our company. So thanks again. Appreciate your time. And as Steve said, have a weekend.